Our speaker today, our visitor, Ron Ferguson, you're in for a treat. I've known Ron for a long time, and we've been on various groups together. I remember maybe when I first met you, it was down at the Council of Great City Schools, and you were on the committee down there. But I've had programs like this before, like where I was at Vanderbilt. That's when I stopped before this one, and Ron was a visitor down there, so for me he's a repeat performance guy. It's a high standard to fill. Ron is trained as an economist. As you know, education research and education more generally has profited from the insights and expertise of economists, and so he brings that to bear. His doctorate is from MIT. He spent most of his time up there in that Cambridge area. He's at Harvard now, and he's got an appointment in the Kennedy School and also in the Graduate School of Education. Now, he's a much sought-after speaker and consultant. And when I think of Ron, I always think about issues having to do with the achievement gap. And I don't know, those of you who are familiar with the edited volume by Jenks and Meredith Phillips, it came out a few years back, which I highly recommend this to you. He has 2 chapters in that, and I read both of them carefully, and ETS one point asked me to write a piece on the achievement gap, and I stole a lot of stuff from Ron, and so I was very pleased to have that expertise to draw on. So you'll see that theme through his work and through his publications, and he heads an achievement gap initiative at Harvard and has for several years. But he looks at it, on the one hand, as an economist, you would think, well, how does a gap in knowledge and skills translate into earning potential? And he's done some of that kind of work. But he's branched much further than almost any other economist that I've ever followed their work. He talks about community and talks about a lot about teachers, teacher professional development, teacher expectations, and so it's with eager anticipation that I wait to hear your talk. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It just occurred to me a little while ago that this is the Minority Speaker Center, that people of color, and there's nothing about color or race in my talk today, but I was thinking about asking people, is there something about color or race that you want me to talk about? And I could kind of weave it in at some point before it's over. But it's all related, though. It's all relevant. What I'm going to talk about today is work on teacher quality that we've been doing. The bills on work that I've been doing for almost the last decade now. I have a project called the Tripod Project that grew out of work in Shaker Heights, Ohio. Shaker Heights is, most people have heard of it. They do things that get them a lot of attention. But they are an inner suburb in Cleveland area, and I was doing work with them one summer, and they asked me to come and work with them for a week on a teacher professional development week that they do during the summer. They give teachers stipends, and people show up and work in groups for the week and produce a written piece at the end of the week and so on. And initially they had an idea, they had some materials that they wanted to use, but it was just kind of a list of things. And I said my eyes glaze over when I look at those lists. I don't know why one thing's more important from the other or where to start. So I made a counter proposal that we used to build that week, and that counter proposal turned into the Tripod Project. And at this point, schools in about 15 states and hundreds of schools have participated in this. We survey teachers and students and feed the results back into the school buildings for use in their strategic conversations. And what I'm going to show you today is the basic framework and then some patterns in the data. One set of patterns just showing in a very correlational way how some of the measures of classroom conditions are related to measures of student engagement. And then I'm going to use some data from one city to show you some patterns in value added, where we look to see what are what are some of the classroom conditions that students can give you feedback on in their survey responses? What are the classroom conditions that predict which classrooms make the biggest gains from one year to another, particularly in math skills, is what we'll talk about today. So let me get started on that. I should turn my phone off too. That's not my phone ringing, but my phone is on. So, wait a minute. I made one audience really mad at me once when I was giving a talk at a private prep school, one of these places that has a pretty high opinion of itself. And my phone rang during the talk, and I answered it. And not only did I answer it, my buddy who was calling was supposed to have come to the talk, and he wasn't there, so I had him say hello to the audience through the phone. I got the thing on. And so the guy who hosted me called me back. He said, "How do you think things went?" I said, "I thought they went all right." He let me know, well, some people were pretty upset. So anyway, I was feeling mischievous that day. So the tripod in tripod project is content, pedagogy, and relationships. And this is sort of in the same family as rigor, relevance, and relationships. The Gates Foundation's work really popularized the phrase rigor, relevance, and relationships. But I would argue that rigor and relevance are just a couple characteristics, a couple dimensions of content and pedagogy. And content knowledge and pedagogic knowledge are about more than just rigor and relevance, although rigor and relevance are two important pieces of that. And then the relationships piece of it is what it is. So the idea is that teachers ought to have a good handle themselves on the material they're trying to teach. That's the content piece. They ought to be able to transmit knowledge to students in ways that students can understand. That's the pedagogy piece. And they ought to be able to connect with kids in ways that kids aren't afraid to ask questions, and they want to please the teacher and so on. There are actually copies of the PowerPoint up here. So I see people taking notes. You might prefer to take them on these. So I'm going to pass those around. So, but the problem is that you can't, when you think about student surveys and actually doing the work, these three legs don't translate that easily and that directly into a framework. So in order to pull up a framework, I actually reached back into some earlier work that I'd done on community development, or actually even before that, on evaluating a program for high school dropouts. There's a framework that initially it was Erik Erikson's first 5 stages of identity development. Excuse me. But later I found the same framework in 4 other literatures that have nothing to do with kids. People rediscover this framework when they think about, well, what do folks have to do? What are the issues that groups work through, that people in groups work through as they try to get things done together? And there are phases of group process that are pretty much the same and are in the literatures. It's Erikson's 5 stages, which have nothing to do with group process. It's about the individual and his relationship to the social environment. But then you get into the actual group process literature, the business marketing literature, the innovation diffusion literature, the social work literature, and you see the same set of ideas in the same sequence in each of these literatures. I was in and out of these literatures in various different projects during the 90s, and I kept coming across this same sequence. I had actually used it to evaluate the youth build program for high school dropouts in the early 90s. But later on, same set of ideas. So in 2000, when we were doing this week in Shaker in the summer, I had already used this thing for youth build program. I'd used it to write about community-based alliances in the context of community development. And so when you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so just pulled it out, so maybe you can use it again here. And it became the foundation for this project too. And the basic idea of the overall framework here is that student achievement is affected by student engagement, is affected by classroom conditions, are affected by how the adults work together in the building. And so the model is really made up of 3 lists of 5 things each. There are 5 building level conditions that have to do with how the professional community works in the building. There are 5 classroom conditions or sets of classroom conditions. There are 5 dimensions of student engagement. We call these targets for student engagement. And then those help to predict student achievement. Okay, and we survey buildings on all these issues and can run the statistical analyses to provide some evidence that these things are related in the way that we say that they're related, at least correlated, and the logic of it leads you to make a judgment that is probably causal, the patterns that we're finding here. Now, the 5 targets of student engagement, as I mentioned, are basically Erickson's first 5 stages of identity development. I don't use exactly the language that he uses, but I come close. In Erickson, the first stage is called trust versus mistrust. It's the infant in the mother's arms feeling safe. Erickson uses the phrase precognitive. The kid is not making calculations, okay? The kid is just feeling safer now. You can imagine the baby feeling precarious. Mommy might drop me. Mommy might not come back when I'm hungry. Or the kid feeling really safe. Mommy's always going to take care of my needs, and so on. There's an analog to that in human dynamics when people come together to work on things. If you think, remember the last time you entered a new group of people that you didn't know very well, and what your main preoccupation was when you first went in there. You want to see who else is in the room. You want to see, can I feel comfortable with these people? Am I going to fit in? You just kind of want to feel safe. You're a little insecure, and that's just it's human nature. And so there's this parallel between Erickson's first stage, the first task, or crisis he calls it in his framework, and what people experience when they go into groups to work. Erickson's second task, or say second stage, is autonomy versus shame and doubt, is what he calls it. I call it balancing teacher control and student autonomy. You could take it up a level and also think about the relationships among the adults in a school building. Okay, the balance between the principals asserting control over the teacher and the administrators asserting control and the teachers having some autonomy. Okay, too far toward the either end of this thing is a problem. If people are too controlled or have too much autonomy, you got a problem. So it's a matter of trying to strike that balance in the middle. In Erickson's framework, you might think of this as the terrible twos, when little kids start to experience the sense that they can do what they want to do, and it's a matter of keeping it in balance. And because if you go too far toward the autonomy, they do things that they're embarrassed about, and it's shame. That's where the shame and doubt issue come in. But if there's too much control, you also have a child that ends up being timid and withdrawn and excessively fearful. So in group process, we find that second stage is where the power struggle kicks in. In classrooms, we've surveyed, we got videotapes we use. I don't know, there might be one in my bag. It hadn't occurred to me to play a video today, but we have a video for it's called The First Day. It's about 8 minutes long. It's teachers and students talking about what that first day of class feels like. And what kids want to know on the first day is, my teacher going to be what or what? What goes in the blanks? Anybody?
Easy or hard?
No, not easy or hard. Somebody heard it. The first person that said something said it. Nice or mean? Yeah. I gotta have a nice teacher or a mean teacher. That's what, doesn't matter if they're third graders or 11th graders. That's what they want to know on the first day of class. After that, they want to know easy or hard. Okay? And they don't want homework on the first day of class. And they want to know something about their teachers as people, so they can relate to the teachers and feel more comfortable with them. And they want to establish some rapport with their classmates, so they aren't afraid to have to ask questions in front of their classmates and so on. But the first thing is, am I going to have a nice teacher or a mean teacher? Okay, and so that's the first day. Not long after the first day, you're trying to get the work started. And no matter whether it's a group of adults on a committee or if it's kids and teachers in a classroom, somebody's being asked to do things they don't want to do when you start to get the work started. And the people have to decide, do I try to get my way and hang back, or do I just conform? And some people are going to decide to conform, other people are going to decide to fight it, and so there's this dynamic in the room as the power dynamic gets worked through. Okay? And sometimes you think of it as teachers test their administrators to see, if you were really serious when you asked me to do that, I'm going to come a couple minutes late to your meeting, or I'm going to come without my assignment done, and see what you do about it. And if you don't do much about it, I'll know it's kind of lax in here and I can get away with stuff. On the other hand, if you speak to me and hold me accountable and say something and let me know you're going to make my life difficult if I don't conform to what you've asked me to do, then maybe I'll conform a bit more. And so there's a testing period that goes on during the power struggle. Okay, a few days into the semester, some kid is going to step out and break what a teacher said was a rule on the first day. Okay, see what the teacher's going to do about it. The kids who don't like to be perceived as misbehaving start asking what they think are hard questions. They want to see how smart the teacher is. They have various ways of testing the teacher. So there's a range of testing behavior that goes on very soon after the first day of class. And so that dynamic, that power struggle, is just normal. Because anytime human beings have to work together to get stuff done, they can't be totally free. There's got to be some constraints on what they do, and learning how those constraints function is part of what you got to learn to figure out how to work in the group. Okay, whether it's a classroom or any other thing. So that's the second phase here. And so see, the first one, you say we got the goal, put simply, is to feel trusting, safe, and welcome. In a more elaborate version of this, we say it's trust and interest versus mistrust and disinterest. You want to feel safe and interested versus unsafe and uninterested at the very beginning. Then the second one is balancing control and autonomy. So balancing control of the authority figure with autonomy of the folks in the group is the second phase. And so that power struggle works its way through. People kind of figure out how it's going to go, and as it comes into focus, they say, okay, I see how this is going to work. Then they get more focused on, okay, what am I going to try to achieve? Given that this is the power dynamic, given the way that this is going to work, what are my goals? It becomes more the focus. And so the third phase of this is ambitiousness versus ambivalence, or commitment versus ambivalence, or different ways to phrase it. People, am I going to try to hit a home run? Am I going to try to do my best work and get the highest possible grade in here? Or am I just going to try to get through it, and hope it ends quickly, kind of thing. And so that's the third piece. So we want people to embrace mastery goals as against performance goals. It turns out that I think the more recent literature is suggesting that with regard to goals, it's good to be high on both mastery and performance. Okay, performance in most cases here has to do with just wanting to show off. You're trying to manipulate people's impressions of you. You're trying to get a good grade because of the other benefits of getting a good grade, not just because of the feeling of having mastered the material. So ideally, you want people to have a sense of what they're trying to achieve, and to really want to maximize the degree to which they just feel more knowledgeable and more successful because they've done well, as opposed to have the goal to try and manipulate people's expectations, or not expectations, people's impressions, without as much concern for whether you really mastered the task in a more substantive way. So that third one is ambitiousness versus ambivalence. And then, but that's just intentionality. So once you've kind of got in focus what you're going to try to get done, what your goals are, you get to a period when it's time to follow through. Okay? And that tends to be a longer period. And the problem is that it never goes the way you thought it was going to go. There are always setbacks, there are always unexpected things that happen. And the challenge is to be resilient, is to pick yourself up when you get knocked down and to keep going. And so the fourth one here is industriousness or diligence versus discouragement and disengagement. Okay, the risk is you become discouraged and ultimately even disengaged if it just didn't go the way you thought it was going to go, and you say, to hell with it. All right? So, and if you're more likely to be able to continue to be industrious and diligent if the other issues have been worked through pretty well. You're feeling safe, like you really fit in with these people. The power dynamic is pretty stable. You've had pretty high ambitious goals, and other people in the group also have high ambitious goals. So then, if you're working and you get knocked down, there are other people you can help pick each other up. You can rely on folks. And we used this framework to evaluate the youth build program for high school dropouts. You get to this phase where kids would be learning construction skills, and they would think prematurely that they were ready to actually start hiring themselves out. So they'd go out and start doing odd jobs for people in the neighborhood and mess stuff up. You know, one kid, the worst case was he tried to put a bathroom in the recreation room in the basement of his girlfriend's parents, and they hadn't studied plumbing at all. Okay, but he thought I know enough about this stuff, I'd go in and do that. He just made a mess of it. Other kids who, put in door frames and so on and cut the frames too short and not know what to do with it. And so then they have to go back and find their teacher and ask the teacher, come help me straighten out this mess. And if the relationships and the power dynamics and the shared ambitiousness are high enough, they feel okay about going back to ask the teacher to help me straighten out what the problems are. Similarly, in any regular classroom, a kid who needs help, what are the conditions under which they will actually seek help as opposed to avoid help? And it has to do with these other things being kind of worked out. And so we get wanting to feel comfortable, working through the power dynamics, figuring out how ambitious, how high to shoot with regard to goals, following through to try to achieve those goals, and then coming out of it in a way where you kind of feel pretty successful. Hey, I did it. It all kind of makes sense. It fits together. I'm ready for the next challenge. As opposed to, I don't know what that was, but I'm glad it's over. Okay? And I'm really afraid of the next time somebody's going to ask me to use the skills that I was supposed to have learned because I know I never learned them. So you imagine a kid who's had a really bad school year, has not learned much, thinking about coming back in the fall. And thinking about the fact that his new teacher is going to think that she can build on the things he learned this year, and he knows he didn't learn them this year. Okay, and so the downside is mastery and consolidation versus confusion, irresolution, sense of failure, and so on at the end of this. In Erickson's model, this is only the 5th stage of 8. I don't go through it and use the other 3, although you could. Okay, there's one place where I actually worked through what the other 3 would look like in the Youth Build program. But for now, in Erickson, basically you've got the early childhood, the toddler years, the preschool, then the school, and then early adolescence, which is identity versus identity confusion, is this 5th stage in Erickson. But the other frames, there's a frame, Tuckman's forming, storming, norming, performing, and a journey. Same issues in the same sequence. Business marketing, buyer-seller relations, chapters coaching buyers, sellers on how to work effectively with buyers. Most interesting thing in the business marketing literature is the preparation for the first encounter with the buyer. How much you learn about your customer before you meet the customer, first to figure out how to tailor what you say to their needs and to put them at ease and so on. And you think about a teacher the same way, anticipating who their kids are going to be and figuring out how do I present myself and material to the students to most effectively engage them on that first encounter. Okay. There's some research evidence suggesting that the first 15 seconds of the encounter with a new person fundamentally shape your orientation toward that relationship, where they measure stuff after first 15 seconds and use those to predict outcomes 4 months later at the end of the semester. So that first encounter matters. Okay, so this frame we use to understand what happens inside schools in terms of engagement. What happens in a classroom across the school year. Also what happens in the faculty, because again you can take this exact same frame and apply it to understand what goes on between the teachers and the administrators in the building. Okay. But this is just the engagement piece of it. And the problem is you can't turn screws in people's heads to make them feel these ways. So you have to give them experiences that lead them to feel these ways. And we capture those experiences using what we call 5 classroom conditions. And these are based in a number of different related literatures about efficacy and control and learned helplessness and all those things. The first condition is that the kids think success is feasible. From my point of view, that's the most important one. Because if you fail on this one, all bets are off. If you ask me to do the impossible, I'd be irrational to be engaged. Okay? It would be irrational to submit to the control of somebody who is trying to get me to do the impossible. To have high goals toward those be ambitious toward the achievement of those impossible goals. Or to be really industrious and diligent in trying to do them if I thought it was impossible. So success is feasible, that the teacher runs the classroom in a way that gives the students the impression that success is feasible, is the first condition. The others aren't as necessary, but they contribute. Okay. The second one is the lessons that seem relevant. There's a reason to learn this other than that you're going to test me on it. And the fact that you're going to test me on it does give me a reason to learn it, at least until the test, so it's not irrelevant. Okay. But relevance is the second. Third is stimulation. The kids would just say fun sometimes, although it's not only about fun. Teachers don't like the word fun. So when we do this kind of stuff and talk about the kids want it to be fun, a lot of school's not supposed to be fun. I said, well, how about stimulating? How about interesting? Okay. And so we use these other words there. But, and you see, and relevance and stimulation are kind of in the same ballpark with regard to being things that kind of get people's attention and hold their attention. There's actually research showing that relevance helps, well, the research, I read something about the animal research. People have told me there's human research of the same nature. They put electrodes on the animals' heads, and they provide a certain amount of stimulation. If the stimulation in the environment around the animal is irrelevant to the animal, there's very little activity on the computer screen showing sort of the electrical activity. If it's about the same amount of stimulation but it's relevant to the animal, lots more activity on the computer screen. Okay? Just lots more thinking that's going on, stimulated by the relevance of it. Okay? We all know the phrase in one ear and out the other. We just tune stuff out if we have no use for it. But if you have a use for it, you don't even have to decide to learn it. It kind of just sticks. Okay? People, in doing this work, I hear examples that are useful. I don't even have to decide to remember those examples. They kind of just stick in my head because they're useful. Okay? An example of the relevance, it just sticks in my head. 10th grade or 9th grade algebra teacher said one of the examples that he always uses to make Cartesian coordinates relevant is he talks about how do they find the miners when these miners get caught on the ground in the mines. Okay, every few years you hear these miners get trapped. How do you know where to drill? Okay, one way or another, somebody's got to lay what amounts to a set of Cartesian coordinates on the ground and triangulate their way to find where to drill. Okay, and that's, even though I'm never going to actually do the drilling, it's a relevant example that sticks in my head. Okay, and so just finding ways to capture and hold people's attention is what the relevance and the stimulation about. We all know how hard it is to stay awake if you're hearing a really boring talk. And so that's the third one. Okay, not boring could be what we substitute instead for interesting and stimulating. The fourth, encouraging and supportive. And the fifth is that the classroom is well managed, it's orderly. So the kids aren't harassing and teasing each other, they're kind of behaving themselves on task. Various incarnations of this framework, we kind of change the mix between these third and fourth, and it really doesn't matter that much. Within the last few weeks, I've changed. This was teachers are supportive and demanding, was this one. And then positive peer dynamic was the fifth one. So I took the demand part of the fourth one and stuck it in classroom management with the peer dynamics on the fifth one, just because it's convenient for some reordering that we're doing. But it's all sort of packaged in there. All right? So we have measures to capture all those concepts in those two lists of 5 things. The 5 targets for student engagement and the 5 types of classroom conditions. To give you some sense of the classroom conditions indices, you'll see here there are 5 sub-indices inside feasibility. So, and these are all multi-item indices on the student test. So the teacher is respectful, enthusiastically responsive to help kids. So welcoming questions, letting kids know, I'm really so pleased that you asked me that, kind of thing. Perceived fairness in grading. The teacher treats me fairly. So if I know the teacher is going to welcome and take my questions, that helps make success more possible. If I think I'm graded more fairly, that helps make success more possible. If when the teacher answers my question, it's a clear explanation, and she doesn't just say the same thing louder, that helps make success more possible. If classes are organized in a way that provides some structure and coherent, I can kind of find my way through what's going on here, that helps make success feasible. If the teacher is available outside of class, that helps make success feasible. And if I really mess up an assignment and want to redo it to get a better grade, that helps make success more feasible. So all these things contribute to the feasibility of success in the classroom, and we have measures of all these things. The lessons seem relevant. That's just one single item. Well, it's a multi-item index, but it's just one index. The stimulation piece, we have items about interesting and enjoyable, about rigor and comprehension as opposed to memorization. So for example, my teacher wants us to really understand the material, not just memorize it, is an item in that. And then it's an appropriate level of challenge, that the hardest lessons in this class are really hard for me, okay, for example. And I'm just not skating through with it. So issues of challenge, and then we get to teacher support, emotional support, encouragement, and then finally order and press, effective classroom management. Teacher demands effort and persistence, supports kids to work, and encourages kids to help each other and work together, and has a climate where kids don't tease each other too much, and then climate where students stay on task. In other words, the students stay busy, behave the way their teacher wants them to, treats the teacher with respect, and so on, are each measures under the classroom, effective classroom management kinds of headings. And then finally, the building level conditions are that everybody experiences support and press. And what I just talked about, I didn't frame it this way, but the kids too feel like people like me, they want me to be successful, they want to support me, but they also start to make my life a little difficult if I don't do what I'm supposed to do. Okay, the press piece. And so everybody in the building, from the principal on down, should be experiencing support and press, is the first building level condition. The second one is distributed leadership, that the administrators aren't the only people who are supposed to identify things that need to get done and set about to try to organize other people to help them get those things done. Then get the curriculum right, and it's more than just focus and align, but get the curriculum right, get instruction right, and use assessment well are the other pieces of this. The teacher survey addresses these, although I haven't spent that much time looking at the teacher survey issues on these particular things. So I'm going to show you some patterns and some numbers now that get at these things. And the first set of numbers is just a simple way of showing you the relationship between the classroom conditions and the student engagement targets. And then the second set of things, I'm going to show you just a few of the patterns in the value-added kinds of results. Here, what I've taken is just a set of 6, and you can't, the numbers kind of got chopped off, but it goes 1 through 6. 6 statements from the section of the survey that deals with classroom conditions. And one statement that relates to feasibility, one to relevance, one to enjoyment, one to encouragement and support, one for demand for effort, and the other for demand for rigor. Okay? And so, if you don't understand something, teacher explains it another way. What I'm learning will help me in my life. Teacher makes lessons interesting. Teacher encourages me to do my best. Accepts nothing less than our best effort, and wants us to use our thinking skills, not just memorize things. Okay? And so, agreement here we define as a student marked totally true or mostly true. So it's a 5-level scale where they could go totally, mostly, somewhat, hardly at all, totally not. And so if they said, well, that's at least mostly true in my classroom, totally or mostly, we said that's agreement. And you can imagine kids could agree with none of these 6 items, some of them or all of them. And the question is, how is the number of these that a student agrees with related to how the student reports their own engagement in this classroom? Okay, and again, this, one could say, oh, you're just looking at correlations. Well, yeah, we're just looking at correlations now, but it's still kind of interesting. So here we just chart the percentage of kids who agreed with any particular number from 0 through 6. And this just happens to be a time when we put the numbers together. We were distinguishing New York City from high schools and other places. These are high schools. in New York City and some other districts. You'll see here we got 12,400 responses from New York City and about 58,000 responses from other districts on this particular chart. And the males and females, and you can't quite see the bottom, although you do have the handout, so you can, I think it should be legible on the handout. So we got females in other districts, females in New York City, males in other districts, males in New York City. And pretty much the same pattern in and out of New York for males and females with regard to how many kids agree with certain numbers of statements. So about 10% agree with none of those statements. So about 1 in 10 kids did not say totally or mostly true to either, to any of those 6 statements. Another 1 in 10 said totally or mostly true to only 1 of the 6. Another 10 to about 2. So if you add those first 3 columns, you got 30% of the kids said no more than 2 of these things are mostly true. Yes?
Are they answering in general, or are they answering for a particular?
They're answering for a particular class. So this is a class-specific survey. It's in this class.
Right.
Certain things are true. So if we look,
So
see,
how did they pick the class that they would answer for?
we typically do a whole building during one period. Whatever class you're in during through 3rd period is when you get it. When we can, we do the whole building during 2 periods, and we hit most kids twice. And then we run regression equations. They have what we call student-level fixed effects in them, which means we're only playing off of the intra-student variation. When we use one thing to predict another, the coefficients in the equations are only affected by the fact that the same kid doesn't say the same thing in both of his classes. Okay, but we usually do building-wide, and some places decide they just want to do math and English or something, and so they'll just have all their math classes and all their English classes. But usually we hit all the different subjects, and the reason to hit all the different subjects is that if you don't, the people whose subjects weren't hit tune out of the conversation that follows. Well, that's not about my subject. My subject may not be at all like that. And so you want to take away any excuse people have not to feel like they're supposed to tune into the conversation afterward.
Do you ever contrast the subjects?
Pardon?
You ever contrast?
We do occasionally contrast subjects. There's not that big a contrast. Math is usually the most challenging. I think some of the, and here I don't remember, I'm going to say this, but I don't remember the degree to which it's true, because there was a prior hypo that I think was validated, was that math teachers in honors courses, I think, tend to be more elitist, and so questions like, my teacher in this class never makes people who ask questions feel stupid, or whether kids who struggle feel welcome in the class or not, that kind of thing. There's some places where kids who struggle do not feel welcome in the advanced classes because of the way that the faculty members run those classes. And we have a little analysis that I do once in a while, I could talk about patient sages, where from the teacher survey, one item on the teacher survey is I have lots of ways to explain the topics that students find difficult. And the teachers can say always, usually, sometimes, usually not, never. I take the ones who say always, and I label them sages. The ones in the others are not non-sages. Then there's another one, I believe it slows my class down too much to encourage low achievers to ask questions. Okay, I believe it slows the class down too much to encourage low achievers to ask questions. I take the ones who say never to that, and I call them patient. So you can see you get a little 2x2 matrix here. So you get the patient sages, the impatient non-sages, the patient non-sage, and the impatient sage. Okay, and then you look to see how the kids respond in the classrooms to teachers who are in these 4 different boxes. Okay, and the impatient sage, okay, is a class environment where kids are made to feel stupid more often, where kids aren't so sure that their questions are going to be welcomed. Okay, the least respected teacher is the patient non-sage. Okay, this is the teacher who can't move the class ahead because they can't quite answer the questions but don't want to leave anybody behind. So you see the class is kind of dead in the water, and it becomes more obvious to the kids that the teacher is confused. Okay, as opposed to the teacher who's confused but charges ahead, and the kids just think the teacher doesn't care. Teacher knows I'm confused but doesn't care, just leaving me behind. You still kind of respect the teacher, you just feel kind of put down. Okay, but for the teacher who you think is inept, those are the ones that have the most behavior problems and are least respected by their students. Okay, so just I came back to this page just to emphasize that the wording is this teacher. If you don't understand something, my teacher explains it another way. It is made clear to them, we're talking only about the class that you're in. And each of these things I learned in this class, my teacher in this class, the teacher in this class, okay, on each of those. So these are class-specific surveys, which makes them pretty unique. Most places do just building-wide climate surveys or building-wide surveys even on these kinds of issues. But when we report back to buildings, a lot of the key issues, we show them a bar chart where every bar is a classroom. And so you see the distribution of agreement across the building. And you'll see in some classrooms, almost all the kids will agree with particular statements, and in other classrooms, nobody agrees with the same statement. And you get this broad range of classroom conditions across the building, which is part of what we suggest they need to work on. Because almost every building has at least a few classes that seem to have figured it out, same teachers, a few teachers who seem to have figured it out, and we have to find opportunities to have some cross-fertilization. And I will not claim that we figured out how to do that really well, but that's what seems to need to happen. So, again, lots of classrooms where lots of kids don't agree with those 6 statements. Only about 20 to 25% agree with all 6. Now, so here, one of the measures of whether kids feel safe and trustful in the classroom is their response to, my teacher makes me feel he or she truly cares about me. And the height of the line here is the percentage of kids who agree with that single statement. My teacher makes me feel that he or she truly cares about me. The height of the line is the percentage who say totally true or mostly true. And so if we go to the kids who say that they don't agree with any of those 6 statements, only between 10 and 20% think the teacher cares. Okay, so if you, of those 6 statements, if you don't say totally or mostly true to any of those 6 statements on the page before, fewer than 1 in 5 kids thinks the teacher really cares about them. They agree with only 1, it's between 20 and 30, and you can just see how it comes up to where you get to, they agree with all 6 of those statements, 90% of the kids. And note, these 4 lines, they're all high school kids. They're males and females in New York City and outside New York City, some inner city, some suburb, pretty much the same pattern. Doesn't make that much difference. You'll see on some of the later charts there's some gender differences, but the pattern is pretty similar. My teacher does all those things, works hard as a teacher, makes me feel like I'm welcome to ask questions, and they have good explanations for me, and they encourage me to do my best, and make it interesting, and so on. It's because they care. By the way, when you ask kids what is caring, it's a 2-part answer. They do things for me they don't have to do, and they won't let me give up. Okay, those are almost the only answers you'll get when you ask kids, what do you mean when you say an adult cares? Fun is not part of it. Adults usually think the kids want you to, and nice is not part of it. The adults, when you talk to teachers and other adults, the kids want you to care more. They just want me to be nice to them all the time. It's not about that. Well, nice is not what kids talk about when they talk about caring. They do things for me they don't have to do, and they won't let me give up. Okay, fun and nice are things that kids like, but they distinguish those from caring. Okay. Next chart. My behavior is seldom a problem for the teacher in this class. This doesn't dip as low as the other chart does, but you see it still clearly has a positive slope, and you see here there's a gender pattern. The boys are about 10 percentage points below the girls, pretty much through this. But there are lots of patterns in these data that are exactly what you would expect, that make you know that this is actually picking up something real. The kids aren't blowing this off. Sometimes in schools, sometimes teachers who don't want to take the survey seriously, I saw my kids take that survey. They weren't taking it seriously. Those data make no sense. They're going to be just noise. But there are too many things correlated the way they're supposed to be correlated for this to be noise. Okay. Okay, so, wait a minute. This is what the kids on average say about their own behavior. That's what, this next one is what they say about their classmates' behavior. Okay. My classmates behave the way my teacher wants them to. Now, it might only take 1 or 2 kids for a class for you to decide, well, it's only somewhat true, not mostly or totally. But it looks like for a lot of them, they are finding that if the kid themselves agrees with none of those 6 statements, there are at least a few kids in the class who aren't behaving themselves. Whereas if they agree with all 6 of those statements, people are much more likely to be behaving themselves. And this is still only 70%. So still at 30% of kids who did not say totally or mostly even on this one. But the pattern is there. In this class, it's important to me to thoroughly understand my classwork. I push myself hard to completely understand my lessons in this class. This bottom blue line is males in New York City. I've done my best quality work in this class all year long. Here you see a gender pattern again. Males are below. Okay, and so those are just patterns showing that there is at least a correlation between the classroom conditions and the student engagement targets. And in our framework, the idea is that the conditions that teachers create in the classrooms affect student engagement. And we distinguish those 5 dimensions of student engagement that I've talked about in the last 5 slides, just hit each of those dimensions. Now, in one district, we've been able to get student test score data for 2 years in a row matched up with student ID numbers. These surveys are confidential, but we do pick up students' ID numbers. And depending upon whether we do it by paper or online, we have different ways of doing that. When we do it on paper, a student gets a printed survey that has a peel-off label on it that has their name on it. The survey also has a barcode. It's coded their ID number. So when they get their survey, the ID, the barcode is, the peel-off strip is taken off so their name is no longer on it. Okay. Then they're given an envelope that's specially manufactured not to be see-through, so nobody can hold it up to the light. And it's got a really strong peel-off strip on it, so it's one of those peel and stick kinds of envelopes. So they get it, they take the peel with the name off, they seal it in the envelope, and they hand it in. Then and their teacher and administrators have all signed slips saying, we know we're not supposed to try to find out how anybody responded on this survey, so it's confidentiality forms that they sign. So then we ship all the surveys off to a printing company that scans them, and we get a data set back and then produce reports that go to the schools. So I'm going to show you some of the value-added patterns. This is for one district of secondary schools in math. And what we do here is we take the test score gains from one year to the next. We use regressions to net out the predictive power of everything you could have known about the student in the past. Okay, effect of their baseline test score, their grade point average, things about their family background. Okay, and the residual from that regression, where the dependent variable was this year's test score and last year's test score and GPA and all those other things on the other side of the equation. The residual is telling you what part of this year's test score would not have been predicted by anything we know about the kid's family background or their past achievement. And the presumption is that that stuff that's left over that you would not have predicted knowing anything about the kid's past must be due to what happened in the classroom this year. And so that's where you take the value added. Yes?
So this is not student fixed effects. You're controlling for as many of the background factors as you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have, in this study, we have a lot with the S kids. Although the background factors, after you've controlled for the lag test score, for the previous test score, and the GPA, the background doesn't explain much anyway. If you don't control the previous test score and GPA, the background is really strong predictors of kids' performance. But the year-to-year gains, looks like it's not coming that much off the background stuff. It's probably coming off what's happening in school. And so the so background factors, we have who you live with. We dummy those out into dummy variables to get single parent, step parent, mixed step parent, regular and step parent, folks other than your parents, two-parent household, and then we have a thing for if something was missing, a missing value indicator. But then we have how many computers in the house. Everything we run in dummy variable form, so we pick up any nonlinearity that's in there. So how many computers, we got different dummy variables for none, 1, 2, and 3 or more. How much education, how many years of schooling do your mother have? How many years of schooling does your father have? Lots of kids don't know how many years of schooling their parents have, especially their father. Although the response patterns in the kids who leave it blank are very much like the response patterns for the kids who say their parents are high school dropouts. So it looks like a lot of the kids who are leaving the parent education blank don't just want to admit that their parent never finished high school. It looks like it's part of what's happening. We have whether you speak a language other than English at home and how often you speak a language other than English at home. How many children live in the household where you reside? Yes?
So you were saying that the portion of the variance you can attribute to the school and the school effects is greater than background effects.
And the gains, yeah. And the levels, no. Okay. So you just run the test score or the GPA, it gets all the background. Most things come insignificant in the way that you would expect. If you put a lag test score in the equation, it knocks almost all the family background stuff out. Okay. So now I'm going to show you some of the value added stuff we've done. And this is preliminary and suggestive. We've got more data coming and for more districts on this. But we took, for this particular district, all the kids we had math classes for. And what we do is we standardize within grade level and then combine the data across grade level. So this is middle and high school kids. By standardize, if anybody knows what I mean when I say we did a z-value within grade level and then put that together across grade levels. So we took the ones where we had basically low achievers, where the average test, so imagine sitting in September and asking, how did the kids in this class today do last spring on the standardized test? Okay, if you're in a class where the average kid in your class was below average last spring, that's a low achiever classroom where you're defining it. If the average kid in your class was at or above average, that's a high. So we divide into the lows and the highs with regard to the classroom. The low classrooms are the classrooms where the typical kid had a below average score last spring. The high classrooms where the typical kid had an at or above average score last spring, right? And then in each of these two groups, the lows and the highs, I want to distinguish the classrooms where they did not gain as much as everybody else did. They fell backward relative to their peers. So these are the bottom quartile among the lows. The decliners are the bottom quartile in gains among the lows. The stable are the middle two quartiles in gains among the lows. And the approved are the top quartile in gains among the lows. So these kids gain more than other low achievers. These kids are about even with everybody else. And these kids fell backward relative to other low achievers. And then at the top half of the distribution, the same idea. The decliners, the stables, the improvers. Okay, so we got 6 groups of classrooms. And here we show you how many classrooms are in each of these groups. Okay, 8, 15, 8, 10, 16, 9. And the question is, when we ask kids questions of the nature I've been talking about, how do their responses differ in these different kinds of classrooms? What's it like to be in a low decliner classroom? What's it like to be in a high improver classroom? And are the patterns pretty similar if we look decline, stable, improved in the bottom half for the lows versus decline, stable, improved for the highs? It's pretty much the same contrast, high, decline, improve on both sides of this? The answer is no. It's a very different pattern for the lows versus the highs. The pattern for the lows is actually kind of troubling, and troublesome, I guess. Let me show you what it is. And here I've just sampled a few of the findings in here. So with regard to classroom management, all these are in standard deviation terms. And so our class stays busy and doesn't waste time. That's a single item. In standard deviation terms, the low decliners are almost 2/3 of the standard deviation below average. in whether they stay busy and don't waste time. That's a big difference. Okay. The others are pretty similar to one another. The high improvers are a bit above average over there. But the big difference here is that the low decliners, both classrooms are out of control. You look across the number of things, you've got low achievers, they're not learning much, big behavior problems in those classes. In this class, my teacher accepts nothing less than our full effort. It's another classroom management kind of issue. Here, we see kind of what we would expect from decliners to stables to improvers. We get teachers being a bit more demanding on both sides of this. As I put this little story together, for the low side, what you've got is pretty demanding teachers who are in the low improvers. They're fairly demanding and they keep their classes in order. But the rest of it's all not good in what you'll see in a second. Okay, they can keep the kids under control, and that's most of what's getting the extra gain. Stimulation. Teacher makes lessons interesting and enjoyable. The worst conditions are the low improvers. Okay, they're getting the low achievers to score better on the test, but not in a way that's interesting. Okay. On the other side of it, the lowest group are the high decliners. Pretty much everything on the high achiever side of it, everything breaks out pretty much the way you might expect. The decliners look worse, the stable are in the middle, and the improvers look the best. The story with the high decliners, it looks like these are teachers who are putting in very little effort. They're teachers who got kids who are pretty good students on average, and they're kind of mailing it in. The teachers are mailing in their work effort. Okay. They're taking kids who are about a standard deviation above average in their test scores, as at least relative to the others in this sample, at the baseline, and they're turning them into average kids. Okay. They're taking, about standard deviation above average the previous spring, right about average the next spring, is what the high decliners are doing. The high improvers are taking kids who are standard deviation above average, and there's a little bit of regression to the mean, but they're still like 0.8 standard deviations above average, even at the end of the next spring. Okay, so personalization. My teacher knows me well. Half a standard deviation below average for the low improvers. Impersonal drill sergeants. They're keeping the kids under control, but not in a way that's interesting, not in a way that's personal. Support for feasibility efficacy. My teacher wants us to use our thinking skills, not just memorize things. The low average means they're below average on. Teacher doesn't want us to just memorize, so it looks like teacher does want them just to memorize. Okay, so it's drill and kill. It's an impersonal drill and kill classroom environment is what it looks like. And likewise here, the high decliners are also pretty low on higher order thinking as opposed to memorization. Teacher provides multiple good explanations when students are confused. Now here, that's a third of a standard deviation below average for the decliners. So this class where the kids are out of control, these classes where the kids are out of control, on average, kids also aren't thinking the teacher's explanations are very good. Okay. So they're better here. Then over here, you have a standard deviation below average on the quality of explanations in the high decliners. Okay. And almost as much. I mean, that's almost 90%, a 0.9 difference between minus 0.49 plus 0.38. Big difference in these classrooms. The kids are pretty much the same kids, but one teacher is really good at providing multiple explanations, and the other teachers, it looks like not only struggling, or not even struggling. It's just kind of not working very hard if we combine this with others. This class is organized in a way that helps students learn. Again, the high decliners are disorganized in the class. This might be the last slide. Oh, there's actually one other little chunk I stuck in here on the end. But you see, for this value added, there are other slides. There's a lot more in there, but it tells the same basic story. It shows you enough to get the story. Okay, among low achievers, the classrooms that are worst in terms of gains are classrooms that are just out of control. I could have shown you teacher availability after school for kids to help kids after school. The teachers in the low decliners with the worst classrooms are more available after school than the other classroom types. So you get the image maybe of a first-year teacher who's trying to work really hard, who's telling the kids, here, I'm here to help you. The kids are just blowing her off. Or who's saying, you know, we're not coming after school either, even though you're there, because your explanations aren't that good, even when we do ask you stuff. And so then you get the ones that do best in producing the gains among the low kids. And those are people who are just about keeping them under control and making them memorize their lessons. And among the low kids, that's good enough to beat everybody else in the gains. You can get them to stay in their seats and to memorize how to do enough of the multiple choice items on the state exam. Then you do better than the folks who can't get the kids to stay in their seats or memorize. On the other side, among the high achievers, we got those high decliners, which are teachers who just the kids, my recollection, how badly behaved were the kids? The kids weren't that badly behaved. Oh, I'm going to go the other direction. Well, let me go. Yeah, our class stays busy and doesn't waste time. Minus 0.15, they're a little bit below average. These numbers are calculated across all subjects, where we're just looking at math. But so the kids aren't that badly behaved. Oh, actually, this is what I was talking about. Here, these kids who decline, who were basically high achievers, they aren't that badly behaved, but their teacher's not exerting any effort to teach them. Is what it looks like we have there. Yes.
I find myself wondering if on most of these slides, 5 out of 6 of the groups are below average. Who is above average?
The other subjects.
Is it just random across?
It's not random. It's
I mean, other than the one group.
Because when I mentioned when he asked me about differences across subjects, I mentioned math is often the most challenging. Well, we've got, you know, kids have 10 options for what subject they say this is, including other. And so but most of them are the core subjects of science, math, English, social studies, and languages. Although we do have some art, music, gym, health, and so on. So the Z values are constructed across all those. So the Z value, the 0, is the average across all those. So when all these are below average here, that means that other subjects are on average rating a little bit better. Okay, yeah.
So, if you look at the students who started out low and improved,
Right.
a lot of the things that seem to be positive for the students who started out high are not for them.
Yes.
And so, you know,
This is not something you want to recommend. Okay, the way they're getting these gains is not a way you want to go out and recommend to people that they go about getting.
well,
I don't think. Somebody could argue the opposite, I guess.
yeah, I just wonder what should one make out of this?
Well, that's the next slide.
Maybe. Well, I guess what I make out of it is sort of order in the classroom is probably a necessary condition for getting much learning done. And in these low achiever classrooms, there's such a propensity toward disorder that just to get order, you've already done better than a lot of your colleagues have. Okay? If, in addition to getting order, you can get the kids to do the memory work, to just memorize enough of how to solve the kinds of problems that are likely to show up on the state exam, you just probably passed another third of your colleagues. And also not pampering them. Because one of the things is, it's a misguided love is a phrase some people use for describing how people deal with kids who struggle academically. It looks like this impersonal style is probably not pampering kids. The kids are probably upset half the time with this person who's pushing them to memorize stuff they don't want to memorize. I would like to argue, and I hope we find evidence as we get bigger samples, that there are teachers who get big gains with low achievers in ways that do rate high on personalization and high on higher order thinking and so on. I mean, my grandmother was such a teacher, so I know that it exists. Okay, my grandmother taught special education her whole career and was a master teacher. At her 90th birthday party, there were high school principals coming back who'd been in her special education classes in elementary school. So, but
I don't want to single out,
yeah.
I know it's bad to single out one result, but
Yeah.
I was looking at this chart on stimulation, and it says,
Yeah.
the teacher makes lessons interesting and enjoyable.
Right.
Below, high improver guys are a half a standard deviation below that.
Yeah.
That's a eye-popping number.
Yeah, both of these.
Well,
Both
yeah,
the
but
high
that's the
decline.
decline. I can
Yeah.
understand the decline, but
Yeah, but the improvers.
improved.
Yes,
So you,
it's drill and kill.
so you don't interpret this, it would be just enough to be uninteresting and unenjoyable by itself.
No, being uninteresting and unenjoyable, uninteresting and not enjoyable is probably not something that on average produces learning. Okay, but it's a side effect. If the teacher's main modus operandi is to have kids do the worksheet at your desk until you memorize the procedure, that's not interesting or enjoyable.
Makes me want to look at some of the covariances across these things
Yeah.
to see what kind of a pattern of these things that you're looking at goes into these low, most improved, so that, just looking at it one at a time.
I've got other files that have a lot more stuff in them, but they all
It's
it's
kind of
reinforced.
discouraging, in a way.
It is. It was surprising and discouraging. That's not the result I was looking for.
Because I think we can get a lot of teachers to do this.
Well, I've had teachers who
Be uninterested.
voice this. I mean,
I got guys right here.
yeah. I mean, even with the personalization stuff. I mean, I was in one in New York City. Because what we do sometime is we talk about, okay, what should you do differently, given some of the patterns in the data and so on. And I was in one beginning of the school year. It was in a New York City high school. I was meeting with the math department. And we were talking about icebreakers on the first day of class and setting rapport and so on. And two of the middle-aged males in the room said, you never taught, have you? And I said, what are you thinking about? They said, well, you go in there being nice in the first day of class, they will run all over you. And I said, I bet you there are some real little ladies in the building who never raise their voice and who never have a discipline problem. And other people shaking their head, yep, they have such people. Real little ladies who go in and establish rapport, and the kids would hurt themselves before they'd hurt this teacher. Okay, they just become so committed to making this teacher's life good. And I said, well, if the little ladies can do it, why can't the big guys? Okay, and it may be something about that power macho impulse that we have when we go in to dominate these kids and keep them under control. And the people who can dominate them and keep them under control successfully do better than the people who do neither. But yes.
So what you just said makes me wonder about developmental differences in this data.
About what?
Developmental differences in your data and whether you have the same data for elementary schools and
Yes.
whether patterns of teacher performance are the same.
Yeah. At the elementary school, did I separate the highs and lows? Yeah, I did. At the elementary school, you do not find this pattern. Okay. At the elementary school, the patterns are more similar to what you find for the highs here, and the patterns for the highs are kind of flat. Okay. These things aren't distinguishing among the highs as much, but I think we've got some heterogeneity that we just can't get around in the sample that we have on the highs. So it's not that I think they can't distinguish in this particular sample, they just don't. But in the lows, it looks more like the highs here. You don't get this perverse effect of a mean teacher in the class who's making the biggest gains. The strongest predictor, or one of the most interesting predictor and a strong predictor in the elementary is a single item in our class, schoolwork is too easy. Okay? And the classrooms that make the biggest gains are those where more than half the kids say maybe instead of yes or no. Okay? The response options for elementaries are yes, maybe, and no. And more than half the kids say maybe in those classrooms that make the biggest gains in English and math. There's not much difference between English and math on the predictors of gains on that one. Okay. And so I think there are developmental issues here. They're the standard striving for autonomy kinds of things you get in adolescence, and how the adults respond to the kids' attempt to exert their power. The guys, the male teachers, and talking to some of the other teachers, fight power with power, probably. Okay, and some of the other teachers fight it with love, and you get different results. Yeah. Yes?
Do you have any, or is there potential for finding data on dramatic gains?
Dramatic gains?
Yeah, so I mean, you have the sort of non-improved, I mean, declined, didn't improve, and improved. I'm just wondering, there must be some people who are working with low achievers who do in fact have some kind of dramatic impact, right? And I'm wondering if you isolate those cases, and obviously a larger sample would make a big difference.
Yeah,
If you
I
isolate
think
those
in
cases,
this sample I wouldn't.
whether they would stack up across.
Nobody, no, there's no classrooms that look hugely successful here. I mean, I'm hoping that in our bigger sample, we've got, I think, 3 districts that are giving us some data this fall from last spring's test scores. So we can continue to look for that. But there also, I should say, there's some unusual styles of classroom too that I'm a little concerned we're not going to discover the way we usually do these things. And I'm in the process of designing a much more rigorous kind of study of these things. But one of the classroom styles that I came across, I was in one high school and somebody noticed that there was one classroom where 100% of the kids answered totally or mostly true to, I pushed myself hard to completely understand my lessons in this class. Okay, I pushed himself hard. Everybody agreed in the class. And the physics department chair said, that's not going to be interesting. That's one of our goody two-shoes advanced classes. It's not going to tell us anything useful for other classes. So I said, well, I got the data right here on the computer. Let me look. So I looked, and it turned out to be not even an honors class. It was a regular level class of 11th graders in math. So then I looked back to see, well, what's true about the pattern of responses to the classroom conditions in that class? It turned out to be a teacher who rated really low on responsiveness on using multiple. If you don't understand something, my teacher explains it another way. Teacher has lots of good ways to explain each topic, thing we cover, and so on. But she rated really high on pushing kids to help each other. And she rated really high on requiring retakes. Okay? And so it was a style where she doesn't answer questions. She makes them answer the questions for one another. And if they don't do well enough on an assignment, they have to do it again. Okay? And so you can imagine why 100% of them said they work really hard. Okay? In that class. And they probably learn a lot. But if we look at the things that are going to tend to predict, even in the top half here, the predicted outcome for that class would probably be pretty low because they're so low on multiple explanations and responsiveness kinds of issues. So there's another, cluster analysis, which not very few people know how to do, and I don't know how to do. Cluster analysis will look at patterns to identify types. And so I'm kind of looking for somebody who's really good at cluster analysis where I can just hand them the data and say, here, see what you can find in this. And then we can characterize those types using dummy variables or something in some later analysis. Let me show you the couple slides I had at the very end of here. Since I threw them in, I may as well show them to you. Just explain to you what's going on with that. Let's go back. This for a period of a couple years on our teacher survey, because I was getting frustrated like lots of people do that professional development doesn't seem to really take hold. And so we want to know why. So we included a question on the teacher survey that was something effective. Think of the last professional development program that had little or no effect on teaching and learning in your class. Okay. The last professional development program had little or no effect on teaching and learning in your class. with that program in mind, check all the following that apply. And I had a list of 17 things. And they could check all those that apply. The things that they checked most often are the things that are here in the bright colors, and they're listed at the bottom of the page down there first. It was just too much on top of everything else the school was trying to do. There was too little support and training. Teachers were not held accountable for doing it, and the way it was introduced didn't inspire me to try it. Those are the things they checked most often. In other words, I blew it off and I never used it in my class. Okay. The things they checked least often were things at the bottom. I never thought it could work with my students. I really tried to make it work, but it just didn't help my students. Doing it well would have been too much work. So they're not saying I tried to make it work, and it didn't. They're saying I found some reasons not to try to make it work in the class. And they may be really good reasons from the teacher's perspective, right? And so here we show the percentages. So fewer than 10% said they really tried to make it work, but it didn't. But 40% said it was just too much on top of everything else. Okay. So then the question is, what's the implication? And that's the last slide in here. Because the problems, if you take the framework, take the tripod project framework that I started with today, that people have an initial encounter with something or other people, and they don't feel safe, and they ideally want to feel safe and interested. Then you have a power struggle. Then you have the clarification and figure how ambitious to be. Then you actually try to follow through. If we kind of think in that kind of frame, well, part of the problem is we often don't introduce things very well. Think of the teacher's first encounter with this new set of professional development ideas. How much forethought did we give to introducing it in a way that they feel excited about it? Okay, so the way it was introduced and inspired me to try wasn't introduced very well. So start introducing things in ways that are geared to foster interest and positive anticipation. We got to market it. Teachers are not held accountable for doing it. That's that second stage. That's that power struggle thing we talked about, and the accountability. And we don't monitor anything. Teachers usually have zero expectation that anybody's going to come around and ask them what they did with what they were being taught at the last professional development, or what they maybe even made up together. Whatever the content was, is somebody going to come around and say, tell me what you did? How's it going? How should we change it? What extra supports do you need? Usually there's none of that. So they know they can go back and do what they've always done, and nobody's even going to know about it. Then, too little support and training. And if you know there's not going to be much support and training, it's hard to be really ambitious because feasibility might not be there. Okay. And so weak support. So we figure out how to support it and do that, including setting up teams and so on, if that's going to help. And then finally, it was just too overwhelming on top of everything else the school was trying to do. We don't do streamlining. A lot of times schools just add something else to the junk pile. It's like the whole fossil record is there of what they've done over the last decade. Also, the other thing they do is they bring back, and they might try to integrate it with what they were already doing, but it's in a way that's incoherent. It just doesn't make sense. If you were a teacher, you couldn't follow that either. And so we need to establish priorities, streamline assignments, foster coherence in the systems through which you're trying to get these things done. And as I said, it kind of aligns with the issues in those student engagement targets that I was talking about earlier. Because obviously, if we're going to get teachers to teach in ways that make success more feasible, lessons more relevant, the experience more stimulating, the relationship more supportive, and the class more orderly, which are the 5 conditions, we've got to give teachers some kind of an experience, which you're probably going to call professional development, and then they've got to go back to their classrooms and do something differently after they have those experiences, so the kids have different experiences. Okay, and so just as we go to fix things in the classrooms, we got to fix things in the building with regard to professional development, so that we can have that spillover effect back into the classroom. So we have a few minutes left. Yes.
So you have a definition of the good teacher, the ideal teacher, and we see that teachers vary on.
I never use the word ideal, but go on.
Teachers vary on how close they are to all these
Right.
ideal practices, and the teachers and some of the students that the teachers like more and give positive reports. There's also higher scores, and
For the above average kids.
yeah. So
Teachers, the ones I hate the most, get the highest scores, and I
You know,
love kids.
Yeah. All right, so is the assumption that this good teacher, it's something about it inherits in the individual?
No.
And, you know, if we could just get more of those who are on the good side of things, it would improve schools and.
You're totally putting words in my mouth. I said nothing that's remotely like what
All
you're
right, well,
saying.
let me.
No, what I said was that teachers have to do things in the classrooms that give kids experiences, that success is feasible and is just kind of stimulating and so on. How we get teachers to do that is what you're kind of getting at. And the one philosophy is we hire people in who already know it. The other is we work with them to get them to that point. And I'm more on that side of the line.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, no, this isn't an attack.
No.
What I'm wondering is, any of us, on average, might do well in those kinds of settings. So the question is, can you rule out all these contextual effects which undermine quality teaching? That's always the question. So
Question
the
is, to
value
what
added,
degree
like-
do contextual effects undermine quality teaching? I mean, and no, you can't rule out the contextual effects. You have to get control for them in some kind of way. Okay? And they are going to vary a lot with the backgrounds of the kids. Okay? And so that's why we do have 20 to 30 socioeconomic background controls in the value-added equation, that we've netted out all that stuff before we get the value-added measure. And we're looking at to see what the net effect is of the teacher after we've taken all that stuff out. But part of what I told you is that also really doesn't predict that much on average in the gains. Now, and there are always going to be some classroom that just happen to get the two kids that nobody wants because they just will ruin your class. And I'm not saying those kids don't exist, okay? And we can run this stuff with school fixed effects, and so we get anything that's systematically different about a school in it. We have the way our survey is set up, the first page of it is 43 items on student engagement with about 7 or 8 scales in it. The second page is 49 items on the classroom conditions. The third page are reports on homework completion rates, what you expect your grade's going to be in this class, what your GPA was at the end of last semester, and all the family background questions. The fourth page is pretty much entirely school culture issues. So all the context effects that you're talking about, kids' assessment of whether their friends think it's important to work hard to get high grades in schools, whether they think they have to fight every day at school, whether they experience school as safe, whether they would quiet down in the hallway if somebody says you're being too loud, whether they play around too late at night and don't get their homework done because they don't use their time efficiently. There's a lot of these kinds of effects of personality and so on that we can control for in these kinds of equations. Now, I haven't used much of that. It'll be interesting to look at some of those things I was just ticking off in the value-added equations, and we get bigger samples, it'll be easier to do that. So I agree with you, context matters, but there are huge differences from classroom to classroom in any particular school in almost any measure of instructional quality that you'll look at. And so I think my focus, I think of this in an ecological way, where for the kid, what matters is what he experiences at the point of instruction. And that's affected a lot by what his teacher's doing. It's also affected by what his classmates are doing, and some of that comes in from outside. So for example, the teasing question, my classmates tease kids. We got like 4 teasing questions. They tease for making mistakes. They tease for lots of things. Those seem not that related to what the teacher's doing. It looks like the teasing is coming in from outside. Okay, whether kids are behaving in the way the teacher wants them to behave in their relationship to the teacher, that does seem to be related to what the teacher's doing. So these aspects of behavior that we kind of tease apart, the part that seems exogenous and coming in from outside versus the stuff that's more directly with the teacher. We haven't looked at the interaction between those as closely as we might, but I should spend more time looking into the issues you're raising. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, We know there's bad teaching. I always just wonder, well, how much of that's the teacher and how much of that's the particular situation, and how well can you separate those?
I think most of it is the teacher, and we can separate it pretty well. Okay, and when the reports that we get back to schools, like I said, we give we give bar charts across classrooms, and the way we nail it really is the student fixed effects analysis, where we take exactly the same kid, 2 different classrooms, okay, and have them characterize what their experiences are. And you get huge differences within students across classrooms that triangulate with everything they should triangulate with. We got some teachers in New York City who pretty much ignore the bottom part of the class. And we just pick that up. And the kids judge one another in those classes as average because they think about what you think of your classmates. They look like they're pretty typical in those classmates, but these teachers don't like the kids. It's a lot of stuff. And yes, he got up to give me the hook. I know.
Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. Ron, we'll use this to advertise your talk, and we're not going to make you carry it back. We'll send it to you.
I like that.
Thanks a lot. Great job.
Okay.